Before you can process payroll, you first have to set up your employees. In QuickBooks, there is an employee center that you automatically get whether you purchase the annual payroll service or not. To access the employee center, you can click on the employee drop-down menu or find it through the home page or any other related icons for it. When you open the employee center, it looks very similar to the customer and vendor centers in terms of its layout. On the left panel are the employees, and when you select an employee, once you set them up and there is activity related to them, you can see their detail information in the upper right-hand panel, and then on the bottom are 3 tabs, including a Transactions tab, To-Dos tab, and Notes tab. The Transactions tab provides historical information related to any transactions recorded and can be filtered by transaction type or date ranges. The To-Do and Notes tabs, just click on the Manage button on the bottom left. On the top of the window is a taskbar where you can add new employees, manage employee information, print, enter time, export information in Excel, and or prepare letters in Word. So let's set up an employee by clicking on the New Employee button. The window that opens up reflects 6 tabs that can be populated with the Personal tab first showing. In this tab, you can enter the employee's first, middle, initial, and last name, as well as how the employee's name is to be printed on the check. If you leave it blank, then the first, middle, initial, and last name will appear as entered in the previous field. The Social Security number should then be entered along with gender and date of birth. This information will usually come from the employee's job application or W-4 form they should fill out that will also provide their withholding information. The next tab is the address and contact information that should be completed. Notice the bottom 6 fields can be edited in terms of how you want to label each field from the choices in the drop-down menu, ranging from phone number to other labels. These choices can be changed for each employee and can be edited at any point as well. The Additional Information tab allows you to print in an account or employee number if used, and the Custom Fields section allows you to create up to a dozen unique fields that can be shared by customers, vendors, and employees. Just click on the Define Fields button and put in whatever label you want for the field you create, and indicate where you want these fields to be included in terms of customers, vendors, or employees. Once these fields have been created, they become part of the database, and so whenever they are populated, they can be utilized where available for customizing reports or forms. The Payroll Information tab allows you to enter an employee's payroll schedule, earnings, additions, and deductions, tax and sick and vacation setup. The payroll schedule selection comes from a list where you create your various payroll schedule or schedules. If you haven't created a payroll schedule, then by clicking on New in the drop-down menu or going under the Employee drop-down menu and selecting Add Edit Payroll Schedule, you can open up the payroll schedule window and create a schedule by naming your new schedule and selecting one of the predefined payroll schedule periods, and then indicate when the first pay period, end date, and check date will be. Once you've entered this information, then QuickBooks will know when each subsequent payroll will be based on the time frequency selected. If you want to assign a default class to your employee, you would do so by selecting the designated class you want from the drop-down menu. In the Earnings window, you can select how your employee will be paid from the payroll item list, which we cover in the next section. So, for example, if you had an hourly employee who was going to start at $10 an hour, you would select the hourly wage payroll item and then put in the $10 in the rate field. You can also select different ways they might be paid in terms of vacation, sick, and other time, as well as overtime, which automatically calculates time and a half for you. You may even put in a field for the occasional bonus that could be paid. The purpose of populating these fields is that QuickBooks will use them as the default setting for the employee when payroll is processed. Keep in mind, you can always make changes to amounts and which fields get used at the transaction level if needed, so nothing is set in cement. If you are going to use time reporting to process payroll, then you want to be sure this box is checkmarked, since if it is left blank, then any time sheet that you complete will not be used to create paychecks, which somewhat defeats the purpose of using timesheets in the first place. The additions, deductions, and company contributions area allows you to select these options from the payroll item list as well. When you sign up for the payroll service, you will be provided with most every type of item you will need. However, there may be certain instances where you have to create or modify existing payroll items. Again, we cover payroll item setup, editing, etc. in the next session. Note that if you select a deduction, such as for health insurance, you put the amount to be deducted from the employee's paycheck as a negative amount. If it's in addition to the paycheck, for example, some type of reimbursement, then this is recorded as a positive amount. If you have a qualified pension plan that the employee is covered under, then you will want to check mark this box as it can affect certain wage and tax calculations. The direct deposit button on the top only applies if you are going to purchase Intuit's direct deposit service, which you set up online, and then it works with your QuickBooks program. To find out more about this service, you can click on the button and it will take you to an internet page explaining the service and allowing you to purchase it and get your employee set up on it. The tax buttons, when selected, provides the ability to enter the federal, state, and other information pertaining to your employee's tax situation. Please note that the information you put in these tabs should come from an official document like a signed and dated W-4 form from your employee. Don't guess or put in what you think it should be. Your employee needs to tell you through a W-4 or equivalent type of documentation their filing status, allowances, etc. It is their responsibility to tell you this. When completing the federal tab, you need to complete the first two fields regarding filing status and allowances. Extra withholdings is up to the employee. Also, unless your employee has documentation to the contrary, they are subject to Medicare and Social Security, and you are subject to a federal unemployment unless you have documentation otherwise. The advanced earned income credit would only be checkmarked if your employee checkmarked this on their W-4. Regarding the state tab, you first have to make sure that you have the right state selected. Unless you have documentation to the contrary, you are subject to state unemployment insurance and disability insurance. So these should be checkmarked, and the filing status and allowances should be the same as the federal selection. Lastly, any extra withholdings can be entered based on what the employee has communicated to you via the proper documentation. The other tab may or may not have anything in it depending on your state, and usually anything showing relates to local payroll items that you would need to know are applicable or not to your situation. Whatever that is not applicable and showing, you can simply delete. The last area to complete is the sick vacation settings. By clicking on this button, you will be able to define your employee's sick and vacation policy by completing the appropriate fields. The basic setup is essentially the same whether you are dealing with sick or vacation time. If your employee has hours available as of the date you are entering them, then you can populate the first field for sick or vacation time. Otherwise, it should be 0. The next field should be 0 in both cases since they are a new employee as well. The accrual period, meaning how your employee will earn their sick or vacation time, can either be based on each paycheck or the hours they work. Whichever way you choose, the next field is used to put in how many hours are to accrue for each period used. The next field allows you to set whether you want to make the employee's sick and vacation a use it or lose it situation by indicating whether you want the hours to reset at the beginning of the year or not. The next fields allow you to set when your employee's year begins and when you want the accrual period to start for either sick or vacation time. Once all the settings are complete, then the accrual or sick and or vacation time will begin, and you can have the existing sick and vacation time that is available show up on an employee's paycheck, which we cover in a later session in this lesson. The Employment tab allows you to put in a hire date and release date when that occurs, and the last field allows you to indicate whether the employee is a regular employee or an officer, statutory employee, or an owner. The Workman's Compensation tab allows you to put in a default code for your employee. The code choices come from the Workman's Compensation list, which you need to populate by either clicking on New and filling out the required information that you would have with your Workman's Comp insurance. You can also go to the workman's compensation list through the list drop-down menu if you want to add, edit, or delete any of the workman's compensation codes you have. Now, let's explore the payroll item list to better understand what payroll type of items you are provided with and how to create, edit, and delete various payroll items you may use.